Good evening and welcome. First of all, I've been told that I have to talk. Oh, it's not up there yet. Then never mind. There it is. Okay, so we're going to be doing some voting on your phones a little bit later using a QR code, and so you may need to log on to the Wi-Fi with this password. So you might want to go ahead and do that now. But it'll be a fun sort of interactive thing that we did last year. So, okay, welcome. This year's Advocacy Forum is focused on the future of the peninsula, which is, as we all know, extremely important since it is undeniably the economic center of our entire Tri-County region. Shaping how it grows and how we protect it is critical because Charleston is so beloved by all Low Country residents and apparently everyone else on the planet as well. The last time the peninsula was closely examined was in the Downtown Plan of 1999. I'll let that sink in, 1999. And that plan really only focused on downtown up to the crosstown. And I think we can all agree that a lot has changed since then. Thankfully, the city is relaunching its updated Peninsula Plan effort after a much-needed pause, and that effort will be paired with a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning code. These related planning initiatives represent two huge opportunities for the community to help chart a path forward and have a fingerprint on how the peninsula grows. Some of Historic Charleston's priorities for the Peninsula Plan and rezoning effort include addressing the proliferation of incompatible large footprint buildings, incentivizing more appropriately scaled, what's often referred to as missing middle housing options, revisiting incentive-based zoning on the Upper Peninsula that at the moment pushes for tall, large format buildings, creating parking maximums for larger new developments, focusing on transit-oriented development along the bus rapid transit system that is in development, and particularly in the neck area, and exploring more opportunities to continue what's always been referred to as, excuse me, the green necklace of parks and open space around the edge of the peninsula. Also, in a nod to our Advocacy Forum from last May, which focused on responsible tourism, we strongly assert that you cannot adequately plan for the complex ecosystem that we call the peninsula without addressing the issue of tourism. Our hope is that the updated tourism management plan, guided by recommendations from the expert Bloomberg team, will be folded into the final Peninsula Plan document. So I now invite the mayor to come forward and share with us his thoughts on his priorities for the peninsula. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Winslow. Now, Winslow did tell me that I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try my best, okay? But we have a lot to cover. But let me start by just saying how much I appreciate all you all for being here. This is a passionate group, and the foundation has a long history for advocacy. And let me just say this, folks, as Winslow alluded to, and you'll hear a lot more about, there's a lot happening right now. A lot happening. So this is an appropriate time for us as a community, and I want to be clear, as a community to come together and really analyze what we want in our city, not just for the next 5 years, not just for the next 10 years, but really for the next 100 years. We're at that pivotal of a time. So I'm going to go over a few different projects that we're working on that will dramatically affect how and where the peninsula grows. And I'm going to wrap up with kind of our plans for the Peninsula Plan. And spoiler alert, yes, we will not only have zoning rewrite as part of it, but also we will be updating and finalizing the tourism management plan as part of this effort. You really can't look at one without the other, considering, you know, tourism does bring 8 million people, generally all coming to the peninsula at some point during their stay. So, without further ado, because I'm on a limited time, I'm going to try and figure this out and go through what our major initiatives are. Some of you all have heard about this. This is Project 3500. Affordability is a critical issue for our city, for our region, and it's something that we need to be very aggressive about addressing. Not something I knew a hell of a lot about before I became mayor, but I have, I'd like to say, get a PhD in this at this point. And bottom line is, we also had Bloomberg take a look at this, and you know, no surprise here, guys. We're growing 3 times the national average. Our area median income has doubled in the past 12 years to almost $100,000 a year. And what we learned is, while normally those are great economic indicators, what we've learned is that rich people are moving here and displacing a lot of folks that are working in all types of sectors across our city. And that is something we need to address. And it's not something unique to Charleston. Any growing city in the United States has this. And the key is how to solve for it. And every city has a different approach. So what we did, and I got to give a shout out to staff that are here tonight because they've been incredibly proactive on this. What they did is when Bloomberg told us, we call it 3,500 because they said, you need to deliver net 3,500 new affordable units within the next 7 years. The past 7 years, we delivered 399. So again, we got to do 10x what we've done the past 7 years and be very aggressive about it. And I'm the type of person, when you give me a goal, all right, well, where's it going to go? So what we did is we analyzed every site that's city-owned property throughout the entire region, also county, school district, and we rated them based on access to public transportation, based on zoning, based on whether or not it's an opportunity zone, all the different metrics that are put into play to rate a property for development. And we came up with sites that would allow for us to hit that 3,500 goal. And most of them are on the peninsula. The Housing Authority takes up the lion's share of them. The Housing Authority, which are the old project houses, there are 5 different properties throughout the city. Most of them were built 100 years ago. They're the largest landowner on the peninsula. And it's hyper underutilized, and it is probably the property that you would least associate with the peninsula of Charleston, in that it's kind of an anywhere government USA construction that was done again in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So what we want to replace it with, and I want to be very clear with this, we're not looking to move the people that are currently in the Housing Authority properties off the peninsula. We're looking to build them new facilities, new buildings in a mixed income, so it would be market rate mixed with affordable housing, about 50-50 split. And we want to do it in a way that really celebrates Charleston and our architects, so being designed forward on this front, not a commoditized product, the Texas donut that you see anywhere and everywhere across the United States. Because our built environment, as you all are well aware, is one of our greatest assets behind our people. So this is what we're going for. That's the same density as that. And the way we're going to do this is, that previous one is an institutionalized product, right? We're going to do things like take a single house, which is a rectangle box, and stamp it out a bunch of different ways, which is what the peninsula is. It's a bunch of different rectangles and squares. And so you can commoditize that when you're building 3,500 units in a way that can become cost effective if you're thoughtful about it. So we're really digging into the weeds here. What the unique approach that the City of Charleston is doing here to address affordable housing is, rather than letting the private sector design it for us, we're going to design it and then bring the private sector in to build it for us. Through a joint venture. And when I say we are going to design it, that means you all are going to be part of that process as well. It is going to be a community-driven effort where we're going to bring in some of the leading experts on this, not just here in the city, but all across the country. Battery extension, another major initiative that we're working on. You'll hear a little bit more about this, but this was originally called the seawall, and I got really annoyed with that because it was an ugly 12-foot wall. We've spent 2 years working with the Army Corps of Engineers to create a marriage of form and function. We used, well, we'll get to the alignment here, but when we were looking at, instead of a 12-foot wall, we said, well, we have a 200-year-old example here that is one of the most popular places to congregate, stroll, etc. So we're going to take that exact design and bring it all the way around the peninsula, from the Citadel campus all the way up to New Market Creek. So about 6.5 miles of public waterfront access that will be a promenade and connect the city in several different ways. So you can see the alignment here in the different sections, and we've really been pretty hard at work on this with the Moffitt-Nickel team and the Black and Veatch team and city staff. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this effort over the past 24 months to get us to where we are today. So again, this is it'll be almost exact size and feel as High Battery, and about the same elevation. And so again, I talked about how we want to connect things. We have the low line investment, we have the Arc Bridge coming over from West Ashley. You want to make sure these things all connect and tie together. Another thing you want to do, because the battery extension protects the city against storm surge and tidal flooding. We also have another type of flooding that comes from rain, stormwater flooding. So the battery initially didn't do anything as a result on that type of flooding, which is pretty severe, right? And so when we're talking about this heavy of an investment, which the federal government would pay 65% of, you want to make sure it solves as many problems as you can. You want to stretch those public dollars as far as you can. And so one of the things that we've done is we've integrated it with our stormwater and our underground tunnel systems to make sure that it can do both. It can address tidal flooding, and it can address storm surge and stormwater as well. Give you some pictures of that. So the first phase would be Adger's Wharf, and the reason why it's the first phase is because it's the smallest, and you want to get in line with federal funding with a small ask before you start asking for the big dollars. So this was a strategy, and it's also a low area, right? It's one of the lowest areas where you have East Bay, which is pretty high. We own all the property, the city does, except for right there at the entrance to the harbor pilots. And you can connect it to Waterfront Park. You know, if y'all are familiar with it, that's a pretty low area over there. So what we're looking to do is rebuild in conjunction with all the improvements that are being done at Hazel Parker with the private sector help and public sector, build a nice sidewalk that comes down and then comes to Waterfront Park, and then it steps up to an elevated platform on the existing Joe Riley Park there. So trying to honor the original design, but also incorporate it into a beautiful public space that people can enjoy. Other examples, this is Lockwood. So we're building a knee wall around Lockwood right now. That'll start this year. And so what that allows us to do by bringing the battery alignment off of the bend at Lockwood is create another lake that could be tidal fed, so the salt marsh could stay alive there. And we can lower the lake, just like we do Colonial Lake, just like we do Long Lake, when it rains. And so then that's retention. So that helps with the flooding from stormwater. So this is a great example of bringing the two things together to work in conjunction. So again, you'll see this, and then you can see the outfalls where there'll be trunks, if you will, that will allow water to go in and out, and you can control the flow. And it'll also give better access to the city marina and all of the boats. This is the bend at Lockwood that we're proposing. So again, very reminiscent of the battery, creating a gathering space there on the point, a beautiful place to watch the sunset. Brillbank, another example of a shoreline that can be improved and then coming around behind the Citadel and protecting the Joe and Stony Field. And again, this is, you would think you were on low battery. So we're basically taking those exact dimensions and replicating them here. Last one, I think is the last one, is Union Pier. This is one we're still working on because of the decking that's there. There's an opportunity to provide, again, underground retention there and provide a beautiful park space, public space out on the water, which is one of the most beautiful vistas that we have. And again, this is public infrastructure that would be, again, completely open to the public. And again, using that water management, having this coming across, connecting into Aquarium Wharf and the elevated areas there. Last thing I'll talk about is Plan 2050. And again, with everything that we have going on, I wanted to figure out not just about the peninsula, but I wanted to look at the entire city and say, okay, I want to know every entitled property that we have and what it's entitled for that hadn't been developed, and where, when, and my staff, I said, when will you think it will be developed, and what is that going to look like? Like, what is our population growth, and how are we going to have our budget reflect that? How are we going to plan for the next 25 years, both from a facility standpoint, from a financial standpoint, all of the above. It's like you would do in any normal business. And I'll have to say, staff has done I thought it was a pretty, simple ask, but it's a lot of work that went into that. And again, I got to really give hats off to Manny and her team, Christopher Morgan. I mean, they've really done a phenomenal job digging into this and painting a picture on what our future can look like. So figuring all of this out, population development growth projections, using GIS to map all of this. We have different iterations of that, different variables on what it looks like. And one of the things that will be of probably interest is that the peninsula is one of the areas that we have the most opportunity for growth in terms of population. This is about 115,000 people is what could be coming to Charleston or moving into the city. And this is within the urban growth boundary under existing entitlements, by right development. No new higher density or anything like that. This is what is currently on the books. And so you can see here, in terms of the aggregate growth, Daniel Island is by far the leader on it. But then from the peninsula, outer West Ashley, interestingly, Johns Island, which you hear a lot of complaints about, and it is a mess, it actually doesn't have a lot more entitled property left to develop, believe it or not. So again, this is something we've taken a deep dive on. This is something that we're going to make public as part of the Peninsula Plan. This is something we all want your engagement on. This is something that will help inform our zoning rewrite, will help inform where we're putting rec centers, where we're putting fire stations, where we're putting police stations in the future. Finally, I'll wrap up with tourism management, because again, this is a critical component that will be part of the Peninsula Plan. And as Winslow mentioned, Bloomberg did a pretty deep dive on this. They've offered several recommendations. We're incorporating a lot of that, but really what we want to do is hear from you. We want to hear from residents, because these are our 5 pillars. These are my 5 pillars. This is staff's 5 pillars. And you see the first one, we want to put residents first. Now, I know that's a popular sentiment with you all and probably long overdue, but there's also an economic reality to this in my perspective. And that is that if you make residents happy, the tourists that are spending the most money are going to be the ones that you're going to get. And when I was a tour guide, I was a tour guide every summer for 4 years when I was in college. And the people that tipped the most, I can promise you, always wanted to know, when they found that I was born and raised here, I always wanted to know, well, where do you like to go eat? Where do you want to go? Not that I'm going to blow up all your local establishments, mind you, and bring a bunch of visitors there, but it is relevant. It is relevant. If we remain a living city, if we remain a place that people can see themselves living here, then we're going to get the caliber of tourists that brings a bigger economic bang versus just quantity-based, right? So second point we'll have on this is that we're going to own the data. There's all kinds of ways to collect data here. Traditionally, it has been the CVB. The City of Charleston is going to collect the data year over year and give you all an annual report on number of visitors, hotel rooms, et cetera, so that it's completely unfiltered and something that you all will see, and we can track trends year over year. Another thing is getting off the peninsula. We have a lot of attractions off the peninsula. We're getting ready to invest a lot of money in Angel Oak, for example. You've got Charlestown Landing. You've got a lot of different places that people can go and visit that aren't peninsula specific, and we really need to be better about telling that story. Last 2 things would be, again, more enforcement and management. That's kind of in the weeds, but it's short-term rental policies. It's a variety of different things that are going to be folded into that. And then also, finally, new revenue opportunities. So those are our 5 pillars that will be part of the tourism management plan. Again, there's going to be a lot of public engagement on this one, so we look forward to working with you all. Both the Peninsula Plan and the tourism management plan will be completed by year's end, is our objective. So we're hammered down on this stuff. Again, a lot of pivotal things happening right now, so I think it's very appropriate that you all are having this forum. It's so busy right now that I have to leave here, can't sit through the panel, and have to go to the Housing Authority to present on Project 3500. So I've got to leave you all, and I think it was 10 minutes, right? It was definitely like maybe 12. But appreciate you all giving me the opportunity and look forward to working with everybody in the months and weeks ahead. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So we are now going to unveil, a video that Historic Charleston commissioned to help the community visualize the many projects and initiatives, many of which we just heard about, that are in various stages of progress across the peninsula. We hired Moondog Animation Studio to create an animated aerial video showcasing major anticipated and potential future developments in downtown Charleston, using realistic satellite imagery and layering in schematic plans for individual projects. The collection of projects highlighted in this flyover represents decades of planning and discussion, spanning multiple mayoral administrations. While it sometimes might feel like projects are moving too quickly these days, it actually does take quite a long time to get large, complicated projects built in Charleston. While some of them are much further along in execution, others are in earlier stages and may not happen as originally approved. I also want to share the caveat that these projects may not be precisely accurate as represented in this video, but we worked as closely as we could from the information we could access from public sources. But nonetheless, our intention is to emphasize projects that cumulatively represent major investments in buildings and infrastructure that have been contemplated in recent years. The purpose of the video is to provoke dialogue and analysis around how these projects should intersect and work together to create a more connected, livable, and urban peninsula. It can be difficult to holistically appreciate the scale, breadth, and potential of these projects when they are so often discussed individually. Think of Union Pier, the Low Line, or Project 3500. It is our sincere hope that this video will help to stimulate creative thinking as we begin to chart a vision for the peninsula for the next 20 years. So please proceed. Thank you. And that will live on our website, so you can go back and watch it over and over and over again, which I'm sure you'll want to do. No, but thank you very much. That took a lot more planning and hard work than maybe it shows, but I do think it really well represents the sort of scale of what we're dealing with tonight. And so now I'm going to introduce Andrea Ostrodka, who's going to come up. She's our first panelist who's going to speak to you this evening. Thank you. Coming all the way from Florida, so we thank her very much for coming.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. I'm Andrea Ostrodka. I am a transit and multimodal transportation planner with Tool Design Group. I work with communities across the country on creating great streets that support economic development goals and quality of life goals for cities. And I'm really excited to be here because there's so much excitement happening here. And I think that video is a great example of all of the things that are coming together. What I want to do, though, is start with a question. What is the purpose of cities? What is the purpose of Charleston? Well, Charleston really started as a trading post, right? It's a natural point of trade where the Cooper and Ashley River came together, rivers came together. Cities are meant to facilitate trade, exchange of goods, exchange of ideas, exchange of information. So historically, the place where exchange happens is on our streets. It's where we do business. It's where we exchange information, ideas. It's where innovation happens. It's where people share gossip. It's where things happen. So as we think about the opportunity that we have in Charleston today, streets are an important part of the conversation because this is, from an acreage standpoint, the largest square acreage in the city of the public realm. Now, I want to talk for a moment about some other places and how they have approached city streets. Now, for thousands of years, people have come together in cities because proximity creates opportunity. When people make connections, they do business. When they do business, economies establish themselves, innovation happens, and that creates communities who are vibrant and resilient. Copenhagen has been around for a long time, but in the 20th century, it started modernizing its streets, and when it did this, its quality of life of residents started to go down. So they started to rethink the way that they were designing their streets. They started designing their streets in the 70s and 80s and 90s more around people than around cars, and it really transformed the way that the city developed over the ensuing decades. And so today, Copenhagen is a thriving city with a diverse, dynamic economy, and it's a place that people like to travel to and visit and start businesses because of all of the different things that are happening there and the high quality of life. Barcelona is another city that has taken an intentional approach to its streets. And it's done this in conjunction with the way that it thinks about land use. It's created a unique sort of block structure where internally it prioritizes trips for people, trips made on bicycles, trips made on foot, trips increasingly being made by scooters. And this has created opportunities in Barcelona for street life to thrive, for small businesses to thrive, for cafe culture to continue to thrive. Barcelona is a really special place that people like to go to visit, and also like to grow and raise a family and establish their businesses because of the unique and dynamic and vibrant culture that it has. And a lot of that is due to its street network. Amsterdam has also invested quite a bit in the way that it approaches its street designs. Amsterdam prioritizes safety and accessibility. So if you've ever been to Amsterdam, you've probably noticed all the bicycles about. More people bike than drive in Amsterdam. This has created a culture of all ages movement, and it's created a place where it's very safe and comfortable and expected for children, for older adults, for people with mobility devices, for children in strollers or prams to get around very easily throughout the city. And then finally, I want to mention Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne is a place that is sort of a city of laneways, and in these small, narrow streets, they've prioritized the cultural aspects of the city. So they've really incentivized building businesses, creating a street life with a lot of outdoor seating, with a lot of outdoor recreation and integration space. This is a place that people go to just because they want to be a part of it. And I think that that is telling about the way that Melbourne has approached its street design intentionally. So when we think about streets, we often think about infrastructure. So pavement, curbs, cars getting from A to B. But really, because streets are such an important part of our public realm, we have to think about them as more than just infrastructure. They're public spaces, they're social spaces, they're our city's economic engines. I would even go so far as to say that they're the connective tissue of civic life. So when we think intentionally about them, we want to make decisions as we move forward with the Peninsula Plan here that emphasize those aspects, that reflect the values of local residents and local business owners to ensure that the investment in streets reflects and positions this community to thrive, not just for 5 years or 10 years, as the mayor said, but for 100 years. So this is really a generational or a multi-generational investment. Now, while Charleston is very unique, and like these other cities, has very special aspects that make it a place that's really like no other place in the world, there are elements to street design that commonly show up in cities who are dynamic, who are vibrant, and who are associated with a high quality of life. So first, they have streets that prioritize people over vehicles. Now, when streets prioritize people over vehicles, they have and accommodate safely and comfortably multiple modes. There's space for bicycles, there's space for scooters, there's wide sidewalks. It's easy for people in a wheelchair or with a stroller to navigate these streets. Streets also support local economies. So local economies are really all about the foot traffic, and foot traffic thrives with sidewalks. I would even say that a thriving sidewalk is the best sort of economic incentive package that you could offer. A thriving sidewalk means businesses excel. Vibrant streets are also safe and comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. They're places where people feel comfortable taking their kids. They're places where older adults feel comfortable moving safely. They're well lit. They have places to sit down. They're shaded. These are streets that are very comfortable no matter your place in life or your age or your ability. And then finally, great streets also reflect local culture and identity. So Charleston is one of the places in this country that has some of the most unique and special aspects to its history and identity. It's also a place that's growing and responding to modern pressures. And so thinking about the next 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 years and what you want to be, what your values are, what you want to leave to the next generation as you make investments today. Thinking about how this shows up in the art, how this shows up in the cultural reflectivity in our streets is going to be an element that continues to make Charleston special, but it's also something that that creates that vibrancy in our streets that people are attracted to, that make them more comfortable, that when you are a local and you see yourselves reflected back in the artwork or the public discourse, it's something that you're familiar with and you're proud of. So I would say that as the city moves forward with the Peninsula Plan and thinking about all of the different projects that are happening, the streets are one of the most important elements to intentionally plan going forward. I'm going to turn it over right now to Christian Sottile for the next part.
Amen. Thank you, Andrea. Well, good evening. My name is Christian Sottile. I'm a preservationist and an urbanist, but I think more than anything, I'm a humanist. And that's the title of my talk. In the words of the great Christopher Alexander, he talks about this idea about building things in context so that when we make the larger world, we're doing it always with a view to the whole. That seems particularly relevant to us as we talk about the city as a whole this evening. So what is our model? And I think it's this, that there should be a human analogy in all work. I think what Andrea was just talking about is right on point. If we remember that one thing, people, then we're on the right path. And I think we can go a little bit further than that and say that the best cities are actual acts of beauty. So you say beauty, and I think yes, say it. It's okay to say it, and it's okay to strive for it. And in fact, Mayor Riley in his recent memoirs starts one of the chapters actually on housing with the idea of the word beauty. He said, I used it every day. Everyone in my administration used that word. I think it's incredibly powerful. And this is a timeless idea. If you go back to the great Roman architect Vitruvius 2,000 years ago, he talked about these three fundamental things about how we make the world around us. And I would say it's a 2,000-year-old idea, but the truth doesn't have an expiration date. And he spoke in Latin about these three things, firmitas, utilitas, venustas, which roughly translate to the idea that the built environment should be firm, it should be strong, commodity, it should meet its function, but it should provide delight. I would say our present dilemma, the present age that we've lived in, sort of the 100-year catastrophe that we're recovering from, is this. And you've heard form follows function, or does function follow form? So you end up in this kind of idiotic circular loop, trying to figure out which one comes first, but you're actually not talking about the third thing, and it may actually be the most important thing. And I would suggest that you might translate that to that one extremely powerful word, beauty. So form and function, of course, important, but beauty just as important. 1,200 years later, the theologian Thomas Aquinas, he wrote about the very same things, three important things in the built environment: integrity, clarity, and consonance. Consonance might be that translation to beauty. So I think there's some very important lessons there that we can observe every day here in Charleston. Cities are not machines, and I think Shakespeare said it best in the words of Shylock in The Merchant of Venice when he said, "What is the city but the people?" So I would suggest that buildings are in fact people, and cities on the whole are people. But we have gone so far in our time from that point of view that we have a long way back. And I'd like to recommend a recent book by the designer Thomas Heatherwick, which is really on point. It's an urgent call for a return. So can we recover humanity in the way we think about our cities? And what does that mean for us today as we think about the Peninsula Plan? So I have to start with this. the seal of this city, which has gone through various iterations over time, but it's always featured one thing really prominently in the frame that you see in the city seal, which is a beautiful woman. The personification of Charleston. There is no better way to describe it. So if you'll permit me, I'd like to talk about that. So what if we saw the city just like that, as a body? And I think you actually can. In fact, it's not that hard. When we look at the city of Charleston, its very anatomy reminds us of that. We look at the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula. We even call it the neck. And it's not hard to translate that when we look at the major streets that bind together these important parts of the city, whether it's Line Street, sort of defining the whole of the lower peninsula, the upper peninsula between Line and Mount Pleasant Street, and then the area north of Mount Pleasant Street as you head into the neck. I think that's how we should be thinking about this city, and it takes us back to 30 years ago when Mayor Riley launched the downtown plan, as it was called at the time. It was the downtown plan. It was below the belt. And there it is. And it's interesting. It's 30 years old, but this city is 300 plus years old, going on 400 years old. So it's actually just a blink. And so I think it's important as we talk about planning that we're always building on those that came before us. And Charleston has such a long lineage of great thoughts, great leaders, and great plans. And so that plan, I think, deserves to be studied carefully as we move ahead. What it didn't do was anything above the belt. And as we know, the city has moved, and in the last few decades have seen a lot of development in those areas. So it's time to focus on the whole body. And I think that's part of the work that would lie ahead in this effort as the community comes together to put all of that, or as Winslow said, to stitch all of that together. And of course, it does have key areas. I think the video identified those large areas that are changing, although lots of small areas are changing as well. So I think that's really my point, is to an appeal to see as a whole, and the importance of cartography. I will say that as a lover of maps, it is these maps that tell us where we come from. They're maps of the present in which they were drawn. They were often visions for the future. They were accurate, but they were also humane. The fact that we can look at these maps over time and be inspired by them today and learn from them today, I think is important. I think we should strive to develop a way of seeing the city in this generation that helps us look ahead. This 1870s map by Walker, Evans, and Cogswell, by the way, is a map that I think does get that right. We're still looking at this 150 years later, and it teaches us something about the everlasting qualities of the city. So I would agree completely with what Andrea shared. Streets are the common thread. This is what binds together all of these plans. It's the one thing that we draw first. And that is, of course, the truth in Charleston. It hardly needs to be said again, but it has to be restated that great streets, great frontages, incremental development over time with many hands, and mixed scales of ownership. These all come together at the street. And really, above all, the most important part of how we ought to be thinking about the things we share in common. So this reminded me a bit of the Lorax, which you may recall, but the Lorax spoke for the trees, so who speaks for the streets? Who speaks for the streets? And we all should speak for the streets. That old saying that diamonds are forever. And I've come to be of the mind that streets, in a way, are just like diamonds. They are forever. This is actually the center city of Florence, Italy, where I grew up. This is a 2,000-year-old city, and that is the Roman plan for that city, laid out 59 BC. Here it is in modern-day Florence. You can still find it if you see that rectangle right in the heart of the city. I mean, there was a fall of a civilization, and it's still there. So over the last year, we've had the good fortune of studying Charleston and studying the neighborhoods and studying the streets, what makes each neighborhood different and how they all fit together. This is a diagram showing the frequency of intersections, street corners, in different neighborhoods throughout the city in Ansonboro and here in the French Quarter. You might think of this a bit like a measurement of thread count. If you were buying really good quality fabric, you'd want to make sure you had a really nice tight thread count. And what we started to learn was the oldest and best parts of Charleston had the best thread count, fine grain filaments tied together in really tight-knit weaves. So we've been studying, actually as part of the work on Union Pier, we've been studying all the neighborhoods in Charleston, what makes them so walkable. We've also analyzed which streets have allowed auto dominance to come in, to kind of take a different point of view, a 20th century point of view. And this map is a little bit shocking, perhaps, but I think it's also intuitively what we understand to be how modern systems have threatened that fine-grained fabric of the old city. And we've studied more specifically the rights-of-way, maybe how the rights-of-way have lost their way in some instances, and comparing them to parts of the city where we can see an intact human habitat. So we are in a significant era, there's no question there, certainly on the peninsula, as the mayor said. We are seeing that one of the greatest emergences of the public realm in a century. And yes, it is the streets that bring it all together. So in closing, in these opening remarks here, I will just say simply this: above all, if we could sum this up in one word, is that the city is human, and this city is a gift, and it is a living body. Thank you.
Good evening. Jared Bramblett, Senior Water Resources Engineer with Moffitt & Nichol. And after Andrea and Christian spoke about what our streets can be and what this city can be, I hope to ground it in thinking out 50 and 100 years to make sure that it truly can be that. Charleston has always struggled with water, and as I thought about thinking about the city in 50 and 100 years and the Peninsula Plan and everything that's going on, I really came back to the three principles that we distilled as we completed our work on the water plan back in 2024. After 2 years of working and studying water across the city, these are the three principles that we distilled as a team that were important. The first is space for water. Water is beautiful when given space. The creeks and marshes of Charleston define low country beauty. Unfortunately, on the peninsula for the past several centuries, we've been taking space from water. This is a map of the peninsula today. It might be kind of hard to see. And this is overlaying the Halsey map on the peninsula, georeferencing it. The Halsey map, created by Alfred Halsey in '49, shows the location of historical events and things across the peninsula. Important for context tonight is the limits of the old tidal creeks that used to snake and weave their way across the city, draining from the High Ridge to the Cooper and Ashley rivers. Overlaying those creek footprints on the city today shows that roughly 40% of the city as we know it today is in the footprint of these old tidal creeks. And the ghosts of these creeks frequently haunt us. They haunt us during rainfall events. They haunt us during storm surge, during hurricanes and tropical storms. And they haunt us with increased frequency when the tides exceed the lower level of our streets and perimeters and backfill and flood low-lying areas. In Charleston, our streets often become our water conveyances. They become our creeks. And as we look out for 50 and 100 years, I think we need to think, how do we reimagine and recreate space for this water in our urban environment? Which leads me to the second principle, which I think is the most important and probably the most challenging for what we're discussing this evening, is elevation matters. The peninsula is the lowest developed portion of the city, unfortunately. It's at the most flood risk. The dark green areas you see here are between elevations 16 and 20. There's not many. Everything's lower than that. And the lighter the yellow and green, the lower the elevation becomes. This elevation is also key and shows that these creeks still run under our street networks. The elevations still indicate that they're there. FEMA flood zones. Majority of the peninsula is within the 100-year FEMA flood zone, and almost the entirety of the peninsula is within the 500-year flood zone. This has real impacts when we start talking about building buildings and the great street and frontages that create great streets. And this is really going to affect how we build and how we look at new development and redevelopment going forward. This is a relatively new building that's built to FEMA flood standards. It's built to city zoning code standards. This has a flood panel system that can be deployed in advance of tropical storms and hurricanes so those floods don't enter the doors. Those panels can't be deployed for unpredictable afternoon thunderstorms that flood the streets where they become conveyances. There's other ways to think about this, and we've done it here locally. These are two examples in Cannon Borough and Harleston Village of infill developments that are relatively new, particularly the one on the right. I mean, that looks like historic Charleston. That is grounded in the past of Charleston, but you've got that activated retail storefront elevated off the streets so that when the streets do become our conveyances, you're not impacting the buildings and residents and people that are occupying those space. I'm afraid if we build at street level and don't think with things like this, we're going to end up with these storefronts that are supposed to be activated that are abandoned or not occupied because people can't live with that flood risk. Which brings me to the final point, and we've covered a lot of these tonight, so I think I'll go through these pretty quickly, but act now and adapt over time. We're acting now, going back through the map, showing the historic tidal creeks, and overlaying the different projects like Battery Extension, Ashley River Crossing, the Low Line, Low Country Rapid Transit. By the way, you can't have rapid transit if the streets are flooded. We really have to figure out a way to keep this system dry. All the redevelopment opportunities, this is not extensive, but Project 3500, Union Pier Terminal, Laurel Island, Magnolia Landing, all of these have opportunities. They all touch these old creek networks. They all have opportunities to link together. And then finally, I'm going to end with the Just Ecological Corridor. This is a citizen-led initiative to plant native planting species along the Halsey, Gadsden, and Newmarket Creek corridors. These can also become or help us all address our flood resilience at our yard, at our street, and at our neighborhood scale. We're all part of increasing the flood resilience in Charleston. And so I end and send this back is, it's not if these projects are going to happen. They're already underway. It's if they're going to happen in a coordinated way that thinks about flood resilience together and builds on it, or if they happen in isolation and do not think about or are not grounded in the water that is here and the water that is coming. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Parker, and I have the distinct pleasure of asking these wonderful folks a series of questions. First, I want to start by thanking you for your thoughtful presentations. It certainly has given all of us a lot to think about. Before we jump into questions, I want to offer one thought for all of us here this evening, and that is this. You know, we talk about a lot's happening in our city right now. Actually, Charleston is today experiencing an economic and cultural vitality that our city has not experienced, I would say, since before the Civil War. Many of the buildings, streets, parks, and civic institutions that we cherish today were built during that time. 100 years from now, will the public and private realm that we create today likewise be cherished by Charlestonians? Most importantly, how do we leverage this economic vitality that has come to our city to really lift our city for all of our citizens? Clearly, Mayor Cogswell gets the importance of this moment in time, and he is acting and creating many very large public projects. Implementing large public projects is very challenging and very expensive. I asked him tonight, what's the price tag on the projects that we're looking at? And he said roughly $600 million. That's the city price tag. These projects are very important, and he deserves our support as he moves forward with these. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Peninsula Plan and the new zoning update. And I think the questions that we offer tonight will hopefully give you all some guidance in how you think about these things as the tools that will help shape our city. So let's jump in. So Christian, I'm going to start with you. Andres Duani, the famous planner, has said that Charleston is the finest city in the country. And he said it's because we have both a terrific public realm and a terrific private realm. Can you expand on what he means by that? And in particular, who builds the public realm and who takes care of it?
Well, I mean, I think this is the universal question. It gets back to maybe Andrea's first point, which is why do we make cities? What's the point? And I think it is the public realm is the thing we all agree on, and it's the thing we should care about the most. And I think maybe in modern planning and zoning, it's maybe the thing we've forgotten about the most, is that there is a distinction between what is held in common and what is held privately. The best cities, not just Charleston, but the best cities throughout the world and throughout time have often, our public discussion should be like completely focused on the things that we all share, because this is why we've all come together, and that's what we ought to care about. And the private realm seems to flourish the most when it actually is carried out with the care and intention of its private owners, often in small increments, often families. Often the irreducible element of society is the family. Families join together to form cities, and when families, as Charleston shows us in such an exemplary way, build a beautiful city, they do it with the expression of love that they have for the city that they are in over many generations. So I think that sort of the expression of the individual and the family and the private realm and the expression of the collective and the public realm, those are the kind of the elements that we see. And Charleston at its best is absolutely that. It's an exemplar.
So I want this to be a conversation. You all want to add anything on any of these questions? If not, I'll just keep on rolling. All right, Jared. So it seems to me that if we don't get the resiliency part right, then all the questions about the public realm and everything else may not matter. And it seems like the conversation, I think collectively, seems to have waned a bit about the urgency of climate change. So my first question to you is, has something changed that I don't know about? And number two, how do we tackle this? I mean, it's such a large and daunting thing. I mean, how do we start? What do we do first? Is there an incremental approach? And I want to say one more thing before I let you talk. Our city has a history of great public works projects, dating all the way back to the wall that surrounded the entire city when it first began. So I know we can do it. So the question is, how do we do it?
So to your first question, I think back to 2015, I went to a sea level rise workshop up at the Baruch Center in Georgetown County, and it was talking about sea level rise, and they had the mayor of Beaufort come up and speak that day. And he talked about, I don't care what you call it, I don't care the politics behind it, you take people and walk out on the dock, and they can show you that the water's higher than it was before. And so I think it's that lived experience. I think it's the actual impacts that it has on a day-to-day basis that drives the decisions that we need to make. And I think that's how we keep the conversation and keep adaptation and keep working to address this so that we do have a city or a vibrant city in 50 and 100 years. Right. I think it's a layered approach. I mean, I think you have these mega projects like the battery extension in partnership with the Army Corps, which it's a $1-point-something billion project at this point in time. It's a huge investment, but it's not going to solve, as the mayor said, all flooding challenges. It gives us an opportunity to work with smart investments that I think there's a lot of exciting things that people are looking at to do it. But it starts flipping to like the ecological corridor I talked about. It also starts at that site scale. So how can we rethink of our lawns and our pavements and our streets to store this water differently, and not necessarily be the conveyance and push it downstream on other people's problems. So it's this layered approach, and I think it's why it's so important we're here tonight having this conversation and what the Peninsula Plan can be, is because we need to layer all these different small and large decisions together in a way that cohesively looks at not just the urban realm as like what makes it great, but also how can it continue to be great? How can we address the flood resilience in it as it goes? So it's incremental. There's not going to be a one, even the battery extension itself won't solve that problem.
Right. Great. Andrea, you know, the streets in Charleston, thanks in large part to Historic Charleston Foundation and others in the preservation movement, really have not changed or seen significant change. In other words, with most exceptions, we did not tear down old buildings to widen our streets so that we could send more cars through there. So our streets are not only beautiful, but they've proven to be adaptable to many different types of mobility. So you spoke about other cities tonight and how they function and how their streets function. So what do you see as the future for mobility in Charleston? And with that vision, are there amendments, slight amendments that we may consider making to the lovely streets that we currently have?
Sure. I think that Charleston does have fantastic streets. And it is a really good thing that the city hasn't widened so many of them. There are several streets. I think, Christian, you showed an example map demonstrating which streets were more urban in character and which streets were more suburban in character. Streets that support people and quality of life and those sorts of dynamic exchange environments are streets that accommodate movement in multiple ways, but are also very pleasant, comfortable, safe places to be. So this means that sidewalks are wide, and that's a challenge sometimes in a number of the historic streets. But to accommodate cars, there's some give and take. So perhaps re-examining the role that certain streets play. Streets are also a network, and Charleston has a fantastic network, meaning there's lots of different ways you can go north and south or east and west, lots of different pathways and routes that you can take to get from one place to another. I think that evaluating that network and the role that it plays, it's going to be really important as these new projects come online to approach the streets that serve and surround those projects with the same sort of care and intention that we think about the historic streets downtown, so that they can function in a way that supports the people and a thriving, growing, blossoming community around those new projects.
All right, so I'm going to get a little more pointed. So everybody in the room tonight thinks we have too many cars on our streets, and I would agree.
Yeah.
So how do we fix that? You're the expert. Putting you on the spot.
So policy is a big thing. If you remove parking or make it harder to park, there's fewer spaces, it's more expensive, it's harder to find. That makes people think twice about how they're going to move. Is it going to be easier to drive, or would it be easier to take a different kind of transportation? Would it be easier to walk? Would it be easier to bike? Would it be easier to take the new LCRT line once that's up and running? That's the Low Country Rapid Transit. And that's going to be fantastic. I think that is going to be a game changer for the peninsula, by the way. So policy is a big deal. I think also, just like some of the other cities that I profiled, they made a choice. They made it harder to drive. They made it harder to take cars. Not impossible, but they made it harder. They made it easier to choose other modes. They made it safe to use those other modes. They made it less expensive to use those other modes, and they made it harder and more expensive to drive.
Okay, excellent. Christian, back to you. You talked a lot about beauty tonight, and I love that. And, you know, Mayor Riley always said we must build with excellence and we must build with beauty. So my question for you is this. Is there a collective sense of what's beautiful in Charleston? I mean, do we share what we think is beautiful? That's one. And then number two, can we zone for beauty?
Well, the question about is beauty shared? I think yes, absolutely, it is, and it's something that we actually know like, instinctively. You know, 10 out of 10 people think the way trees arc over a street is beautiful. We know that, and the more we emulate nature when we think about the built environment, the more often we're pointing ourselves toward beauty. And I think the best parts of Charleston do that. 10 out of 10 people think a sunset is beautiful. 10 out of 10 people think Venice is beautiful. And 10 out of 10 people think some of the oldest, finest, and best parts of Charleston are beautiful, not because they're history buffs, but because they're human beings, and they're wired to see it and want it. That's why it's so important. And we were told we weren't supposed to talk about it. We were told 100 years ago. Actually, the architect Adolf Loos said ornament is crime. Like, it actually became illegal to talk about it. I actually love that the American College of Building Arts started in a jail, because, but those criminals are on the loose now. They were released. So I think we're at a really interesting moment. I think we have a generation coming in, and the alphas are actually wired for beauty. They're not carrying all this baggage that we're not supposed to talk about it. It's like, bad words. Like, no. Like, why would you have a problem with that? And so I think it is kind of the secret weapon. And you would say, well, it's kind of squishy. We don't really know how to talk about it. But here's the other thing that I think is so interesting right now, is that neuroscience and neuroaesthetics are actually pointing to the fact that parts of our brains light up when we see certain patterns in the world. If you're really interested in this, there's a cognitive scientist named Anne Sussman, who's written a book on cognitive architecture, and she actually wires people's brains, and you can look at heat maps of the things that they look at. And they actually look at a lot of boring buildings. Thomas Heatherwick calls it the blandemic. They look at boring buildings and they just like slide over them, and they go to beautiful things, and their eyes pause and they rest and they try to decipher it. So I think we should talk about it, but we actually can talk about it a lot of different ways now. Now, can you zone for it? Hell no. I think zoning is the most unnatural thing ever created by human beings. We've only had it for 100 years. So I asked somebody, show me a good place we built with it. One place, just one. We haven't. So I think we hold our hope in zoning way too high when we think it can fix our problems. Our problems start in our hearts. They start in our communities. They start in the families that we raise. Our commitment to our place, our love for beauty. That's how we fix it. And that's actually where I think Charleston has a unique killer advantage in this conversation. It was the city in America that was the first to speak up against the disaster of the 20th century, to say, wait a minute, we're not going to demolish our city. We love this place. Our generations that have come before us have loved this place. And so historic preservation owes its debt nationally to Charleston. And I think Charleston ought to be the city that leads the way forward. We ought to be building a city today worth preserving. And I think we actually have to we have to actually go back before zoning to figure out how to make that kind of city. But I think we can, and I've become completely addicted to spending time at the College of Building Arts, because I'm actually seeing a generation of 20-year-olds that want to make that kind of city. So I'm really excited about it, but zoning isn't going to be the way. Love is going to be the way.
Love it.
All right, so Jared, back to you. So clearly, when we think about resiliency in Charleston, we're dealing with flooding primarily. But another big issue with climate change is heat stress. And clearly, that's going to impact Charleston as well. What are your thoughts on that? And I would open that up to the rest of the panel as well. What should we be doing as a community?
I mean, I think it does tie into flood resilience as well, because, I mean, trees are incredibly important. The tree canopy is probably the easiest, most effective mitigation of increased heat. And it's hard to have trees over wide streets. It's hard to have trees when you have large Texas donuts. Like, there's ways that we can have trees and increase our tree canopy, and that addresses not just heat, but flooding as well. So I think looking at ways and looking at contiguous strands of trees, true, not so much on the peninsula with as developed as we are, but how do we preserve those existing large, older tree canopies that we do have? I think those are going to be really important as you talk about heat, but
I would add that it's also really important to just the comfort of being out and about in the city. So it's hot out there. It was hot out there today walking around, and we're in May. So when we think about what it's going to be like in the summer and in the early fall, this year, next year, for the next 100 years that we're planning for, we've got to think about how we're going to experience the beauty that is Charleston, that is outside, if our streets are comfortable to be on or not. And the tree canopy makes a big difference there for just human comfort.
Christian, any thoughts?
Here.
I
They
was
say
thinking
the best time to plant, you probably know this, the best time to plant a tree?
yes.
Yesterday. The second best time is right now.
So, you and I have talked about this before, but like King Street. So how can we get more human comfort on King Street? So I'm giving you a layup question here.
For a man that's had his office on King Street for decades, I want to hear from you.
So what I'm talking about is, like, we've talked about awnings and other things that provide shade and comfort for pedestrians, which really enhance, to everybody's point, the quality of the public realm and really making it work for pedestrians. So I think, that is something that perhaps could find its way in the zoning ordinance, is getting shade protection for storefronts or something like that. So, I mean, we're supposed to be giving ideas that can go into the peninsula plan and the zoning ordinance. Any thoughts on that?
And we're talking about shade in particular.
Yeah.
I think we start with the right thought process on the streets, and we're on the right path. I would say that's, in the last 20 years, maybe the biggest gap in what's been shaping up here in the city, because the Riley plan for 1999 only went to the waist of the body. Meanwhile, the zoning jumped ahead and incentivized a lot of growth and development in the Upper Peninsula, which we're seeing now, but the streets never caught up.
Yeah.
And I think that has really sunk in for me, that in a coordinated way, we would be thinking about the public realm while we were thinking about the private realm. And the private realm will follow its own trajectory, and there's work that we can do there, of course. But it's really a sin of omission to not focus on the public realm. And I would say in the Upper Peninsula, we've done, we're behind. We're behind. The streets up there do not match the urbanism up there. So that's an area where I feel like if we get the right ingredients, and maybe that's the single most important thing that could come out of at least the physical side of how we think about the next 25 or 50 or 100 years, is to really take seriously the commitment to designing beautiful streets, which of course have all the things. The trees are in the right places, buildings front those streets, and they can have awnings, and they can do all the natural things that private buildings do to relate to those frontages. But I feel like we've got some catch up to do.
So who builds these streets? Who pays for this? How do we do this? I mean, do the public sector obviously is involved in building public realm, but can the private sector be involved as well? I mean, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think if you look at most development patterns off of the peninsula, when you think about suburban development, developers are building the streets.
Right.
And so that does kind of tie back to zoning and what you're looking at from those large-scale tracts, but that's not really replicable to or relatable to the peninsula. I think most people know that South Carolina Department of Transportation owns and maintains most of the streets downtown. The city has taken some back, but not a lot, and that really limits what we can do in those streets as well. I think there's a story as Daniel Island was being developed that the right-of-ways are wider than they originally planned to be because they were going to be DOT-owned and maintained roads, and they had to meet some sort of DOT standard. And I think if you could imagine what it would be like if it was more dense and a little urban out there, how much better it would be. So there's the question, I think everything comes back down to funding. I mean, flood resilience, transportation, mobility, it's all like what can the city afford to do? What can we afford from the public? What can we do from the private? And I do think we're going to have to look for public-private partnerships and things like that. But I mean, I think, Christian, I'll let you speak, but I think there's some really cool ideas that are happening and what you studied throughout the peninsula about our street scale and what makes it work that is important to think about across the peninsula.
Right. No, I think it is important to remember that the streets are the unity of the design of our streets is something that we should hold in common. I think our current, the last century has led us to allowing the private sector to build our streets, and I don't think that's necessarily right. I think we should hold high standards, public standards for public streets that show, and I think Mayor Riley certainly, there are trademarks to the way streets are designed at their best here in this city that show that, and I think we need to remember that as we move forward. And certainly the old city engineers knew that as they laid out where the streets ought to be. It was not a question, where do you want the street? It's like, no, this is where it goes. Right. And that's how we build coherence over time. I think we've too often, so much modern development is sort of a patchwork of everybody's fantasy idea of how things ought to be. And the framework, that 1870s map that I had up there is one of my favorite maps of Charleston because it's a map made by many hands over time, but it's kept the public realm in sharp focus. And I think we need to think of our streets that way. We shouldn't be pushing them into the design preferences of the private sector, but we should hold them to high public standards.
Totally agree. Well, hopefully that'll find its way into the Peninsula Plan. Andrea, so City of Charleston had a trolley system that ran for almost 70 years. I think the last trolley it started with horses. Last trolley, I think, was in the late 30s. So, we hear so often today that in order to have transit, you need density levels at like 40 units per acre. Clearly, we did not have that in Charleston for those 70 years. In your work with the Low Country Rapid Transit, I mean, how important is this density number? I mean, is that really what we need? And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think that the short answer is no, that's not what you need. And that density is one ingredient in sort of a complex combination of factors that allow transit to be successful. So it's residential density, it's employment density, it's the design of the streets, it's the walkability of the area, it's the size of the blocks, it's the mix of uses, commercial, shopping, office, residential, are all of those things happening? And I think that that's one of the beautiful things about the LCRT system is that they've really been thoughtful about that mix of uses. And so I think that the system is going to be very successful.
Well, that's great to hear.
I also want to encourage you to come to your last question.
Is it time?
It is time.
All right, so my last question is the same question for all of you. And so we could start with Christian and then move down the line. So in 100 years from now, when people look back at this moment in the history of our city, what must be done, in your opinion, to assure that they will conclude that we got it right?
In 100 years.
I'll give you 100 years.
I'll take it. There's a lot of ways to answer that, and there's no way we could answer that precisely. But I think I would say for us in this moment, we are about to be fully seduced by artificial intelligence. We're already halfway there. Every age has a preoccupation. It was the Industrial Revolution. We mechanized our cities. We in the 1990s, we saw our cities as data because we were obsessed with data. And now we're about to virtualize our cities, and they've always been people. And I would think for people to look at Charleston a century from now to say they didn't follow the pack. They followed what they knew was true about why we make cities. And that was that was the secret ingredient to helping others see how it ought to be and to not make those same mistakes. So I would say not to be seduced by the world, the virtual world that we're entering, and remember the physical, tangible, beautiful, humane city that this is. And if that means doing it differently than every other city in the land, then that is what Charleston ought to do if they keep the compass pointed toward those eternal and everlasting things. So that'll be my answer for you.
Well, that was a good answer.
A tough one to follow.
All right, Jared, you're on.
I think it is tied back to we grow in a way that looks to the past, that looks at what makes Charleston special, to look at the beauty as Christian talks about it, but also looks forward with adaptability in mind and maybe a little bit of humility in mind that we don't know what the future holds, especially when we start talking about water levels and flooding. We have projections, we know where it goes, but can we design, can we think about ways to build so that we can continue to adapt and these buildings are still adaptable? We're seeing great examples with elevation of historic structures in the city and how the bar and zoning code has allowed that, or not zoning, but that's been allowed now. But how can we think about building that adaptive capacity in our structures and our buildings so that we can continue to adapt to unknown conditions?
Okay, excellent.
And I agree with Christian and Jared, and I would add that 100 years from now, one might say everything changed when you took control of the streets. Control your destiny. I think that the things that you're talking about with adapting, taking action now and adapting, that sort of dynamic is something that the city can control if it has control of the streets. I think that creating paths that are also places such that our streets are an important part of our public realm, perhaps one of the most important parts of our public realm, means that we should control our own destiny. So I would add to your responses that taking control of the streets is going to be crucial.
So I hope every one of you all tonight, on your way home, hopefully by foot, look at the street that you're walking down and embrace its beauty and everything that it means, and perhaps many things that you haven't thought about in a long time. And you'll notice earlier on there were slides that we chose of streets in Charleston. And this notion of really embracing the public realm, our public realm, and treating it with reverence and nurturing it, and being sure that it goes forward for many generations, I think is, if there's one thing we could take away from tonight, that would be it. So thank you very much for your attention. So now we're getting into a really fun part of the evening, which is where all of you all get to participate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ask some questions, and then when the questions come up, you guys get to answer those questions. And then as you're answering the questions, we'll actually see the results of the questions live here. The first question is, And so you can answer this question with words, correct? First question is, what is the biggest opportunity we have to improve Charleston over the next decade? So y'all type that in and we'll see what comes up. So 16 people have answered, 18 people. Come on, guys. I love you, Dad. Thank you. I know that was for me. That's the best thing I've heard in a long time. Hi, Dad. All my children are here. All right, so what do you think? Another 10 seconds? All right, so Lisa, how does this work? The larger the words, that's... Walkability, take back the streets. You know what, panel? I think we did a good job. I think that they got the message we wanted them to have. All right, this is awesome. Yay. All right. All right. Question number 2. All right, we ready to go to question number 2? Do you think Charleston can grow in a manner that enhances quality of life? Wow. There you go, 71% yes. All right, next question, last one, third question. Which public-private investments are the most important for the future of Charleston? So you can rank these. My list has 2 more on it, but maybe we'll just go with these 6. Yeah, we'll just go with these 6. Oh. You have to scroll. So, okay. Can they see the other ones on their phone? Okay. Got it. Are y'all seeing this? All right, everybody done? So what's the final tally here? So it automatically puts it in order? Yes. Mm-hmm. Quality urban design and architecture. Yay. Stormwater and flooding. All right, Jared. Streets and public realm. Yay. Housing, parks and green space. That one needs to bump up a little bit. Pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure. Ferry service. We didn't talk about that, Andrea, and I know I was supposed to ask you that question, but next time. And then lastly, automobile mobility. So clearly, a shift in how we see our city. Panel, thank you.
Nice. All right. Thank you all. Thanks so much. Thank you. I want to thank our 3 panelists and our star moderator. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you being with us tonight and talking about these various topics. Something landed in the responses, clearly. which is exciting to see. Appreciate the engaging discussion about the challenges and opportunities before us. I also want to thank the mayor for his leadership and for joining this evening to share his thoughts on this important topic. I know that he thinks a lot about this, and it was nice to hear him share that. And then lastly, I want to thank you all, the audience, for coming out to learn more about these planning initiatives and how we can envision and advocate for a more connected and resilient peninsula. We do look forward to working with the city and with all of you over the months ahead to leverage these incredible opportunities we have in front of us. And I will say, I was a little surprised at the responses, and maybe to your point, people that come to something like this on a Monday night are going to be a little more thoughtful and progressive and share the values of Historic Charleston Foundation and our friends here. So it was good to see. Thank you. One last thing, a shameless plug. I know there's a couple of QR codes in your program, but you do have a QR code underneath the audience engagement one to, if you're interested in signing up for our advocacy newsletter. Lisa has started a new bi-weekly newsletter just focused on advocacy issues, and it's a wonderful way to stay engaged on things that are happening around our city, not just on the peninsula. I promise we do care about other parts of our region, but tonight was very peninsula focused. So we do hope that you'll stay connected with HCF through our newsletters, social media channels, and website. And again, thank you all for coming out this evening, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks so much.